In the sterile, climate-controlled world of first-class air travel, some rules are written in the booking terms, and others are etched in the cold glare of privilege. For Dr. Althea Williams, her ticket was for seat 2A, a window seat in the Starlight business class of Aura Air Flight 710. But for the wealthy couple who wanted her seat, her ticket was irrelevant. They saw only the color of her skin and decided she didn't belong. They summoned the flight attendant, the captain, and the full weight of corporate authority to remove her. What they didn't know was that Althea carried an authority far greater than any of them, and with a few quiet, carefully chosen words, she was about to turn their world and their flight completely upside down. This is the story of how one woman, pushed to her limit, didn't just stand her ground, she grounded the entire plane. The hum of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner was a familiar lullaby to Dr. Althea Williams. It was the sound of transit, of moving between 2 points in a life dedicated to precision and safety. Today, it was meant to be the sound of relief. She was concluding a grueling 72-hour inspection blitz at a maintenance facility in Queens, a necessary but exhausting deep dive into the guts of modern aviation. Her destination was London for the annual Global Aerospace Safety Symposium, where she was a keynote speaker. All she wanted was 7 hours of relative peace, cocooned in the plush leather of Seat 2A on Aura Air's flagship transatlantic service. She had booked this seat 6 months in advance, using a combination of saved air miles and her own hard-earned money. It was a rare indulgence. Usually, she was content in premium economy, but the brutal schedule leading up to the conference demanded she arrive rested and sharp. She settled into the seat, the supple material cool against her back, and let out a sigh that felt like it carried the weight of the entire past week. She stowed her carry-on, a well-worn leather briefcase containing her laptop and presentation notes, in the overhead bin, and placed a smaller personal bag under the seat in front of her. She was dressed in comfortable but professional travel attire, dark trousers, a silk blouse, and a tailored blazer that spoke of quiet authority. Her hair was styled in neat, intricate braids that cascaded over her shoulder. She looked, to anyone paying attention, like a woman who knew exactly where she was supposed to be. The boarding process continued its chaotic ballet around her. The scent of designer perfume mingled with the faint, clean smell of cabin air. Champagne flutes clinked softly as the flight attendants began their pre-departure service. Althea politely declined the offered glass, asking instead for a bottle of still water. She wanted a clear head. It was then that they arrived. They moved through the aisle not as passengers, but as conquerors surveying their domain. The man, Preston Vance, was in his late 50s, with a florid complexion that spoke of expensive lunches and a perpetual state of indignation. His suit was Savile Row, his watch was a Patek Philippe, and his sneer was custom-made. Trailing him was his wife, Beatrice, a woman who seemed to be sculpted from ice and disapproval. Her blonde hair was a helmet of perfection, her diamond earrings catching the cabin light with aggressive fire. They stopped abruptly at row 2, their eyes landing on Althea. Preston glanced down at his gold-embossed ticket holder, then back at Althea, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. Beatrice didn't bother with such subtleties. Her gaze swept over Althea from head to toe, a silent, dismissive inventory that lingered on her braids and her dark skin before dismissing her entirely. "Excuse me," Preston said, his voice not asking but commanding. "I believe you're in our seats." Althea didn't look up immediately. She was finishing an email on her phone, a final confirmation to the symposium organizers. She pressed send, took a slow sip of her water, and then turned her calm, intelligent eyes toward him. "I'm sorry?" she asked, her tone even. "Our seats," he repeated, jabbing a thick finger at his ticket. 2A and 2B. You're in 2A. Althea offered a small, polite smile. Misunderstandings happened. I believe you'll find that 2A is my seat. Perhaps you have the wrong row? She held up her own boarding pass on her phone screen, the details clear. Williams, A seat 2A. Beatrice let out a short, sharp sigh, a sound like glass breaking. Oh, for heaven's sake, Preston. Let's not have a scene. Just get the girl. She didn't mean a girl. She meant staff. A flight attendant, a young woman named Heather with a bright, fixed smile and an air of harried stress, hurried over. "Is there a problem here, Mr. Vance?" she asked, her voice instantly deferential. She had clearly recognized him, or at least his type. "Yes, there is," Beatrice cut in, her voice a sharp weapon. "This person is in my husband's seat. We are in 2A and 2B. Heather's professional smile faltered for a microsecond as she looked at Althea. It was a fleeting but unmistakable shift. Her eyes took in the same details Beatrice's had, and a swift, ugly calculation was made. She saw a black woman sitting alone in a seat often occupied by men like Preston Vance. The conclusion, for her, was simple. "Mum," Heather began, turning to Althea, her tone now syrupy sweet but laced with steel. "Could I please see your boarding pass?" Althea showed it to her, just as she had to Preston. Heather glanced at it, her brow furrowing in momentary confusion. It clearly said 2A. She then looked at the Vance's tickets. They also said 2A and 2B. A double booking. It was a rare but simple airline error, usually solved by checking the master manifest and reseating one party, often with a generous upgrade or compensation. But Heather didn't see a simple error. She saw a problem, and she had already decided on the path of least resistance. It seems there's been a little mix-up in the system," Heather said, her voice directed at the Vances, but her eyes flicking toward Althea. "Not to worry, we'll get it sorted right away." She turned back to Althea, her smile tightening. "Ma'am, we have a lovely seat for you in our premium economy cabin. It's very comfortable. We'll just move you back there so Mr. and Mrs. Vance can take their seats." Althea's polite expression didn't change, but a cold stillness settled over her. It wasn't a request, it was an instruction. She was being told to move, not because of a neutral system error, but because the assumption had been made that she was the one who was out of place. The Vances were the immovable object. She was the inconvenience to be cleared away. "No, thank you," Althea said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm quite comfortable here. This is the seat I selected and paid for. If there's a double booking, I trust you'll find another seat for Mr. and Mrs. Vance." Heather's smile vanished completely. "Mum, we need to resolve this so we can depart on time. The Vances are our Platinum Star Alliance members. The system should have protected their seating." The implication was clear. Their status trumped her ticket. "I'm also a Platinum member," Althea stated calmly, though it was irrelevant to the principle of the matter. "And I am in my assigned seat. I'm not moving." Beatrice scoffed loudly, ensuring the nearby passengers could hear. "This is ridiculous. Preston, do something." Preston puffed out his chest. "Listen here," he said, leaning over Althea, invading her personal space. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing. If you got this ticket on some kind of discount program or employee pass. But we are sitting here. Now, are you going to move, or do I need to have the captain come out here and make you move?" The threat hung in the air, thick and ugly. The whispers from the surrounding seats began to ripple through the cabin. Althea felt a familiar, weary anger begin to coil in her stomach. It was a feeling she'd had to swallow countless times in her life, in boardrooms, at academic conferences, and now in a first-class airline cabin. It was the exhaustion of having to constantly prove her right to exist in spaces others felt they owned. "That won't be necessary," Althea said, her gaze unwavering. She looked past Preston, directly at the flight attendant. "I've given you my answer. I will not be vacating my assigned seat. You need to find a solution that does not involve me giving up what is rightfully mine." Heather's face hardened. She saw not a passenger asserting her rights, but a problem passenger. "Ma'am, if you refuse to cooperate, you will be in violation of crew member instructions. We will have to deplane you." The final, humiliating card had been played. "Move down, or get off." Althea stared at the three faces before her, Preston's smug entitlement, Beatrice's cold disdain, and Heather's brittle, bureaucratic hostility. They had made their assumptions, they had drawn their lines, and they had no idea who they were dealing with. A slow, cold resolve washed over Althea, extinguishing the flicker of anger and replacing it with something far more formidable: professional duty. "Very well," she said, her voice so soft it was almost a whisper, yet it cut through the cabin noise like a razor. "I think it's time you get the captain." The walk from the cockpit to the Starlight business class cabin was short, but for Captain Robert Sterling, it was an unwelcome journey. Delays were his enemy. Every minute the aircraft sat at the gate was a minute that ticked against his on-time performance statistics, a metric by which his career was measured. The message from the cabin crew had been vague but insistent. A seating dispute in row 2, passenger refusing to cooperate. In his 25 years with Aura Air, Sterling had seen it all. In his experience, these situations were almost always caused by someone feeling entitled to something they hadn't paid for. He emerged from behind the cockpit door, a figure of immediate authority. His uniform was crisp, his silver hair neatly combed, and his expression was one of stern impatience. Heather met him halfway, her face a mask of anxious relief. "Captain, thank you for coming out," she said in a hushed, urgent tone. "It's Mr. and Mrs. Vance, our Platinum elites. There was a system glitch, and their seat, 2A, was also assigned to another passenger." She gestured towards Althea. "She's refusing to move. I've offered her a premium economy seat. I've explained the situation, and she's refusing to follow crew instructions. We can't close the door for departure." Captain Sterling's eyes followed Heather's gesture. He saw Althea sitting calmly by the window. He saw the Vances standing in the aisle, Preston's face turning a dangerous shade of purple with contained rage, Beatrice tapping her foot with the rhythmic impatience of a metronome. He absorbed the scene in a single, practiced glance. He saw a well-dressed, powerful-looking couple and a black woman sitting alone. Like Heather, his mind, conditioned by years of unconscious bias, took the path of least resistance. He made a snap judgment. He strode over, his presence immediately commanding the attention of the entire cabin. He bypassed Althea and addressed Preston directly. "Mr. Vance, Captain Sterling, my apologies for this inconvenience. We seem to have a computer error, but I assure you, we'll have you in your seats momentarily." It was a promise, a clear signal of whose side he was on. He then turned to Althea. His tone shifted, losing the warmth it had held for Preston and gaining a patronizing edge. "Ma'am, I'm Captain Sterling. I understand there's been some confusion with your seat." "There's no confusion, Captain," Althea replied, her voice steady. She met his gaze directly, refusing to be intimidated. "This is my assigned seat. Your airline appears to have double-booked it. That is an issue for your staff to resolve with Mr. and Mrs. Vance." The captain's jaw tightened. This was not the quick, compliant resolution he had expected. "My flight attendant has offered you an alternative seat in our premium economy cabin. As a gesture of goodwill for the mix-up, we can also offer you a travel voucher for a future flight." "A gesture of goodwill would be honoring my ticket," Althea countered. "Downgrading me for your airline's mistake is not goodwill. It's a penalty. I'm flying to London to speak at a conference. I require the space and ability to rest that this particular seat provides, which is why I booked and paid for it. I will not be moving to premium economy." Her calm, articulate refusal seemed to infuriate the captain more than an outburst would have. It was the calm of someone who believed they were utterly in the right, and it challenged his absolute authority on his aircraft. "Mum," he said, his voice dropping low, taking on a hard, non-negotiable edge. "Let me be perfectly clear. This aircraft is under my command. Federal regulations state that you must obey the instructions of the flight crew. My crew has instructed you to move. Your refusal to do so is now a security issue. It is interfering with the duties of the crew and preventing the safe and timely departure of this flight." The words, "security issue," were a deliberate escalation, a piece of verbal artillery designed to shock and awe a difficult passenger into submission. The surrounding passengers fell silent, their earlier whispers replaced by wide-eyed stares. This was no longer a simple seating dispute, it was a confrontation. Beatrice Vance seized the opportunity, her voice dripping with venomous satisfaction. "You hear that? You're a security risk. They're going to have you arrested." Althea ignored her completely. Her focus remained laser-sharp on Captain Sterling. She recognized his tactic for what it was, a baseless threat, a misuse of his authority to solve a customer service problem. He was cornering her, attempting to humiliate her into compliance. "Captain," she said, her voice remaining preternaturally calm, "are you truly invoking FAA regulations regarding crew interference over a seating assignment error made by your own company?" "I am telling you the consequences of your actions," he retorted, his face now grim. "You have two options. You can accept the seat in premium economy, and we can all get on our way. Or you can refuse, at which point I will have you removed from my aircraft by airport security. The choice is yours. You have 1 minute to decide." It was the final, brutal ultimatum. Submit to the injustice, or be publicly shamed and ejected. The Vances looked on with triumphant smiles. Heather stood behind her captain, nodding in solemn agreement. The power of the entire airline, embodied in this one man, was being brought to bear against her. Althea looked out the small, thick window of the Dreamliner. She saw the ground crew moving on the tarmac below, the blinking lights of a fuel truck, the vast, complex ecosystem of the airport operating around them. Her whole life had been dedicated to this world, not the customer-facing glamour of it, but the hidden, critical framework that held it all together. The physics of lift, the metallurgy of turbine blades, the intricate dance of hydraulics and avionics, and above all, the unforgiving web of regulations that separated safe passage from catastrophe. Captain Sterling was using those regulations as a bludgeon. He was about to discover that she knew them better than he did. She knew not just the text, but the intent, the history, and the full, crushing weight of their enforcement. She took a slow, deliberate breath, centering herself. The anger was gone. The frustration had evaporated. All that remained was a cold, clear sense of purpose. He had given her an ultimatum. Now she would give him one of her own. She turned back from the window, her eyes meeting his. The hint of a polite smile had vanished from her face, replaced by an expression of profound seriousness. The passenger was gone. Dr. Althea Williams was now on the clock. "Captain Sterling," she began, her voice changing subtly, acquiring a new resonance of command. "Before I answer your ultimatum, I have a few questions for you. It's regarding the airworthiness of this aircraft." A wave of confusion washed over the faces of Captain Sterling and Heather. The Vances looked momentarily baffled, their triumphant expressions faltering. The sudden, bizarre pivot in the conversation threw everyone off balance. "The airworthiness?" Captain Sterling repeated, his voice thick with disbelief and annoyance. "Ma'am, what are you talking about? This is a brand new 787. It is perfectly safe." "I'm sure it is," Althea said, her tone meticulously neutral. "But perfection in design doesn't preclude errors in maintenance. I'd like to know about the sign-off on the hydraulic actuator for the starboard outboard flap. There was a replacement noted in the maintenance log this morning. Can you confirm that the final torque check was verified by a second certified engineer and logged in accordance with FAA Directive 2024-18-03? Silence. A thick, heavy silence descended upon their small corner of the plane. Captain Sterling's face, which had been a mask of command, now registered a flicker of genuine shock. Heather stared, her mouth slightly agape. This was not the language of a disgruntled passenger. This was the language of the industry, specific and technical. Preston Vance, recovering his bluster, scoffed. "What on earth is she babbling about? Just get her off the plane." Althea didn't even glance at him. Her eyes were locked on the captain. "The directive is quite specific, Captain. Following the incidents with the actuator failures on the 787-9 variant, it mandates a dual-signature verification for any hydraulic component replacement on primary flight control surfaces. I happened to be reviewing the logs for this aircraft's tail number, November 787 Alpha Uniform, earlier today as part of a random audit. I noted the entry for the actuator replacement, but I did not see the required secondary signature." Captain Sterling's face was losing its color. The tail number. She knew the aircraft's registration number. She knew about a specific maintenance action performed just hours ago, and she was quoting a Federal Aviation Administration directive. The blood drained from his face. The carefully constructed power dynamic of the past 10 minutes shattered into a million pieces. Who are you?" he stammered, the authority in his voice completely gone, replaced by a dawning, sickening dread. Althea reached into her personal bag at her feet. She didn't move from her seat. She simply retrieved a small, unassuming black wallet. She flipped it open, revealing not a driver's license or a credit card, but a laminated piece of government identification. The gold eagle of the United States Department of Transportation gleamed under the cabin lights. She held it up for him to see. Her voice was flat, professional, and utterly devoid of emotion. It was the voice of a person stating an undeniable fact. "My name is Dr. Althea Williams. I am a senior airworthiness inspector for the Federal Aviation Administration Airworthiness Directive Compliance Unit. My job is to ensure that every aircraft I step on is in full compliance with federal safety regulations. For the past 72 hours, I have been leading the team conducting a surprise audit of your airline's JFK maintenance facility." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. The cabin felt like a vacuum. The clinking of glasses had stopped. The ambient chatter had died. Everyone was listening. "When you and your flight attendant threatened to have me removed from my seat for your airline's clerical error," she continued, her gaze as sharp and precise as a scalpel, "I was a passenger. But when you, the captain in command, invoked FAA regulations to threaten me, you made it a professional matter. You have demonstrated a willingness to misuse safety regulations for customer management. That calls your judgment into question, and it forces me to act not as a passenger, but as a federal agent." She put her identification away, the snap of the wallet echoing in the stunned silence. "So I will ask you again, Captain Sterling. Can you personally vouch for the dual signature verification on that actuator replacement? Because if you can't, then my earlier observation of the logbook stands. And as an FAA inspector, I now have reason to believe that this aircraft may not be in compliance with an active airworthiness directive, which means, Captain, that as of this moment, this aircraft is not cleared for flight. The Vances stared, their faces a comical mixture of horror and utter incomprehension. Preston's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Beatrice looked as if she had been slapped. Heather, the flight attendant, had gone deathly pale, her hand flying to her mouth as the catastrophic scale of her misjudgment crashed down upon her. Captain Sterling looked as though he had been punched in the gut. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The woman he had threatened to have dragged off the plane held the power to end his flight, and potentially his career. He had picked a fight not with a passenger, but with the regulator herself. He had tried to use the rule book as a weapon, only to find out she was the one who had written it. The ultimatum he had issued moments ago seemed like a distant, foolish echo. Now there was only one authority in the cabin of Aura Air Flight 710, and she was sitting quietly in seat 2A. The cockpit of a Boeing 787 Dreamliner is a sanctuary of calm professionalism, a space where checklists and procedures govern every action. But the atmosphere inside the cockpit of Flight 710 was now anything but calm. Captain Sterling stumbled back through the door, his first officer, a younger man named Ben Carter, looking up from his pre-flight checks with concern. "What's going on, Bob? Gate agent is calling, asking about the delay." Sterling sank into his seat, running a hand over his face. He looked pale, shaken. "Shut the door," he rasped. Ben did as he was told, the heavy door clicking shut, muffling the sounds of the cabin. "Okay, what's happened?" "The seating dispute in 2A, Sterling began, his voice barely a whisper. "The woman. She's FAA." Ben's eyes widened. "What? Like from the local office?" "No," Sterling said, the word coming out choked. "Worse. Much worse. Airworthiness Directive compliance. She was auditing our MRO all weekend. She knows the tail number. She's asking about the sign-off on the starboard flap actuator we had replaced last night." The colour drained from Ben's face as well. Every pilot knew what that meant. The AD Compliance Unit was the FAA's elite squad of technical enforcers. They were the people you never, ever wanted to see unless it was a scheduled visit. A surprise audit was bad enough. Having one of their lead inspectors on your flight, a flight you were now holding at the gate because you'd threatened to remove her over a seating squabble. It was a career-ending nightmare. "The logbook," Ben said, his mind racing. "Did they get the dual sig?" "I don't know," Sterling snapped, his panic turning to anger. "I'm the pilot, not the mechanic. I see the green light on my panel. I trust the paperwork is done. I signed the aircraft acceptance form based on the maintenance chief's signature." "She says she saw the log and it wasn't there," Ben pressed, understanding the terrifying implications. If she was right, they were in violation of a major AD. Flying the plane in that condition would be a federal crime. "Get maintenance on the radio. Now," Sterling commanded. "Get Greg, the lead mechanic from the night shift. I want him to physically pull the paper log, not the digital summary, the actual hard copy, and confirm that second signature is on Form 8130. While Ben got on the radio, his voice tense and clipped, Sterling had to make another, even more dreadful call, to Aura Air's Operations Control Center, OCC. He explained the situation in clipped, jargon-filled sentences, trying to downplay the part about the seating dispute, but the OCC director on the other end was no fool. "Let me get this straight, Captain," the voice on the phone crackled, dripping with managerial fury. "You are holding at the gate with a full load of passengers because of a seating issue that has now escalated to a potential grounding order from an FAA inspector who was a passenger on your flight. That's the gist of it, Sterling admitted, feeling a profound sense of humiliation. And whose idea was it to confront this passenger? Sterling remained silent. The accusation hung in the air. Back in the cabin, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The Vances were still standing in the aisle, but their entitlement had curdled into confused fury. Preston kept trying to catch Heather's eye, demanding to know what was happening, but she avoided his gaze, her face a frozen mask of terror. She was replaying the entire incident in her head, every condescending word she'd spoken to Dr. Williams, every dismissive gesture, and with each recollection, a fresh wave of nausea washed over her. She hadn't just been rude to a passenger, she had actively instigated a conflict with a federal official who held the fate of the airline in her hands. Dr. Althea Williams, meanwhile, remained in her seat, the very picture of composure. She had opened her laptop and was now reviewing a complex technical schematic, seemingly oblivious to the chaos she had unleashed. But she was not oblivious. She was observing. She saw the other passengers whispering, their phones out, likely recording. She saw the fear in Heather's eyes and the dawning comprehension of the other flight attendants, who now gave her a wide, respectful berth. She felt no triumph, only a deep, abiding weariness. This should never have happened. Her authority was a shield for public safety, not a sword for personal disputes. But they had forced her hand. The senior flight attendant, a calm, experienced woman named Linda, approached Althea cautiously. "Dr. Williams," she said, her voice respectful. "Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "The water I have is fine, thank you, Linda," Althea replied, using the woman's name from her name tag. It was a small gesture, but it acknowledged Linda as a person, something Heather and the captain had failed to do for her. "I'm simply waiting for the captain to confirm the aircraft's compliance status." Linda nodded. "We've been told there's a technical delay. We'll be making an announcement to the passengers shortly." "That would be wise," Althea said, her eyes returning to her screen. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Finally, the radio in the cockpit crackled to life. It was Greg, the lead mechanic. His voice was strained. "Captain, we have a problem." Sterling's heart sank. "Talk to me, Greg." The digital log was closed out by the junior tech. He clicked the box for the second signature. But the supervisor, John, he got called away to the emergency on the A330. He never put his wet signature on the hard copy. The torque wrench verification was done, but the paperwork, it isn't complete. Technically, Captain, the log is not in compliance with the AD. A stunning silence filled the cockpit. They were illegal. Dr. Williams was right. She had seen the discrepancy from a cursory glance hours ago, and their entire system of checks and balances had failed to catch it before the aircraft was released for service. Captain Sterling closed his eyes. He was done. His authority had not just been unraveled, it had been vaporized. He had threatened a woman who was infinitely more powerful than he was in this context over a problem he had fundamentally misunderstood, and in doing so had exposed a critical safety failure at his own airline. He picked up the cabin address microphone, his hand trembling slightly. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Sterling speaking. We apologize for the extended delay. Due to an unforeseen technical issue requiring verification on the ground, we are unable to depart at this time. We do not have an estimate for our departure. We ask for your patience as we work with our maintenance and operations teams to resolve the situation." His voice was hollow, stripped of its usual confident swagger. In situ, Dr. Williams heard the announcement and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. The first phase was over. Now came the consequences, The captain's vague announcement did little to soothe the growing restlessness in the cabin. A technical issue was a common euphemism, but the passengers in the Starlight class cabin knew better. They had witnessed the entire drama. They had seen the confrontation, the flash of the badge, and the subsequent panic that had gripped the crew. The story was already spreading through the plane via text messages and hushed whispers across the aisles. The entitled couple in row 2 had picked a fight with the wrong woman, and somehow she had stopped the plane from taking off. For Preston and Beatrice Vance, the situation had morphed from a satisfying power play into a waking nightmare. They were still stuck in the aisle, a human bottleneck of their own making. The flight attendants, who had previously been falling over themselves to placate them, now regarded them with unconcealed animosity. They were the cause of this mess. "This is an outrage," Preston boomed, his voice echoing in the tense cabin. He marched toward the galley, cornering the senior flight attendant, Linda. "I want to know what's going on. Why are we just sitting here? And why hasn't that woman been removed?" Linda, whose composure was usually unflappable, turned to him with eyes of cold steel. "Sir, the delay is due to a safety inspection. That woman, as you call her, is Dr. Williams, a federal aviation official, and I suggest you return to the aisle and lower your voice." Beatrice, who had followed him, gasped. "A federal official? Don't be absurd. She's probably some diversity hire on a power trip." The comment was so vile, so dripping with venomous prejudice, that even a nearby passenger winced. Before Linda could respond, a new figure appeared. A man in a sharp suit, his face etched with stress, had come on board from the jet bridge. He was Daniel Peterson, the Aura Air Station manager for JFK, and he looked like he had just run a marathon. "Mr. and Mrs. Vance?" he said, his voice tight. "I'm Daniel Peterson. I need you to come with me, please." "It's about time someone with sense showed up," Preston huffed. "This whole situation is a disgrace. We demand compensation, and we want—" "You can discuss your demands in my office." Peterson cut him off, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Right now, you are interfering with a federal inspection. Please come with me." He gestured firmly toward the open aircraft door. The Vances, finally realizing they were no longer in control, shot a hateful glare at Althea before allowing themselves to be escorted off the plane. With the Vances gone, Peterson made a beeline for seat 2A. He crouched in the aisle, bringing himself to Althea's eye level, an immediate posture of deference and respect. "Dr. Williams," he said, his voice low and sincere. "Daniel Peterson, station manager. On behalf of Aura Air, I want to offer my deepest, most sincere apologies for what you have just experienced. It is inexcusable. The behavior of our crew was unprofessional and unacceptable. We will be launching a full, immediate investigation." Althea looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Peterson, your company's customer service policies are a matter for you. My concern is the violation of Airworthiness Directive 2024-1803. "Yes, of course," Peterson said quickly. "Captain Sterling has informed me. Our maintenance supervisor is on his way to the aircraft with the physical logs. That will no longer be sufficient," Althea interrupted calmly. She folded her laptop closed. The failure was not just in the paperwork. It was systemic. A critical sign-off was missed, and the aircraft was released to the gate. The captain, whose job it is to perform the final verification, was unaware. He was, by his own admission, relying on a green light. That is not an acceptable standard of care. She reached into her bag again and pulled out her phone. She navigated to a secure application, her fingers moving with practiced speed. "Mr. Peterson, as the ranking FAA official on site, I have no choice. The chain of failure is too significant to be resolved with a simple signature now. I need to ensure this isn't a widespread procedural issue at this maintenance station." She typed for a moment, and then hit send. "I am issuing a formal ground stop order for this aircraft, tail number N7AU. It is to be taken out of service immediately and moved to a secure maintenance hangar. It will not fly again until it has been completely re-inspected under the supervision of my office. Furthermore, I am grounding your entire fleet of 787s at this airport, pending a full audit of all maintenance logs from the past 48 hours for compliance with all active ADs." Peterson's face went ashen. It was the nuclear option. Grounding one plane was a disaster. Grounding the entire 787 fleet at a major international hub was a catastrophe, a multi-million-dollar cataclysm of cancellations, rerouting, and reputational damage. "Dr. Williams." "Althea, please," he stammered, his corporate poise shattering completely. "Isn't there another way? It was one mistake." "A mistake on a primary flight control surface is not one mistake," Althea countered, her voice now hard as granite. "It is the very definition of an unacceptable risk. My job is to protect the flying public, not your airline's balance sheet. The order has been issued. It is now active in the FAA system. Your operations control will be receiving it momentarily." As if on cue, Captain Sterling's voice came over the cabin speakers again. This time it was trembling with defeat. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have just received an official order from the Federal Aviation Administration. This flight has been cancelled. I repeat, this flight has been cancelled. We will be returning to the gate, where you will all need to deplane. Aura Air agents will be available in the terminal to assist with rebooking. I deeply apologize for this outcome." A collective groan of despair and anger erupted from the passengers. The flight was not just delayed, it was over. In the cockpit, First Officer Ben Carter stared at the official notification that had just flashed on his screen. "Ground stop order, FAA directive, all Aura Air, B-787 aircraft JFK. It was real, it was happening. Dr. Althea Williams packed her laptop into her briefcase. She stood up, smoothing her blazer. The battle was over. The safety of the public had been protected. But the fallout, the bitter harvest of karma for those who had caused this incident, was only just beginning. The process of deplaning a cancelled flight is a miserable affair under the best of circumstances. For the passengers of Aura Air Flight 710, it was a surreal experience. As they filed out, many cast curious, awestruck glances at the calm woman in seat 2A, who now stood waiting patiently in the aisle. The story, in its various mutated forms, had spread completely. She was an undercover Fed, a safety czar, a secret shopper with the power to cancel flights. Whatever the specifics, the truth was clear. She had been provoked, and the consequences had been biblical. For the key players in the drama, the reckoning was swift and brutal. In the station manager's sterile office, Preston and Beatrice Vance were in the middle of a self-righteous tirade when Daniel Peterson returned, his face a thundercloud. "Our flight has been cancelled because of that woman," Beatrice shrieked. "What are you going to do about it?" Peterson looked at them, all pretense of customer service diplomacy gone. "What am I going to do? I'm going to inform you that due to your disruptive and verbally abusive behavior towards another passenger and flight crew, which directly led to a series of events culminating in a federal safety action, Aura Air is terminating its relationship with you. Your platinum status is revoked. You are being placed on our permanent no-fly list. Your tickets will be refunded. Now I suggest you find another way to get to London. Security will escort you out of the terminal." Preston was apoplectic. "You can't do that. I'm a million-miler. I'll sue you. I'll sue the airline. I'll—" "Feel free," Peterson said tiredly. "You can explain to your lawyers and the press why you chose to harass a senior FAA official. I'm sure it will make for a fascinating case." The mention of the FAA shut Preston up instantly. The implications, legal, social, and professional, crashed down on him. The Vances were unceremoniously escorted from the airport, their world of privilege having finally collided with an immovable object of consequence. The missed London gala was the least of their problems. The delay cost Preston a face-to-face meeting that was to close a $50 million merger. By the time he could rebook on another airline for the following day, the other party, spooked by his unreliability, had pulled out. His arrogant gamble over a seat had cost him a fortune. For Heather, the flight attendant, the consequences were more personal and just as devastating. She was immediately suspended without pay, pending a full internal investigation that everyone knew had a foregone conclusion. She was called into the office with Peterson and a union representative. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face as she tried to explain. "I was just trying to de-escalate, to get the flight out on time. I thought." "You thought what?" Peterson asked, his voice cold. "You thought you could look at two passengers and decide, based on nothing but your own prejudice, which one was more valuable, which one belonged, and which one didn't. You didn't see a customer in your assigned seat. You saw an obstacle. You escalated a simple seating error into a federal incident that has now cost this airline millions of dollars and grounded our most profitable fleet. You failed at the most basic level of your job." Her career was over. The incident report would be a permanent black mark on her record, making it nearly impossible to get hired by another major airline. Her single act of biased judgment had ended the life she had worked so hard to build. Captain Robert Sterling faced a different, but equally grim, fate. He wasn't fired. His union was too strong for that. But he was immediately removed from active flight duty and demoted. He was ordered to undergo months of retraining, including mandatory sensitivity and procedural compliance courses. He would be relegated to a desk job, auditing flight plans, his days of commanding a flagship international route over. More painful than the demotion was the humiliation. The story would spread through the pilot community like wildfire. He would forever be known as the captain who tried to pull rank on an FAA inspector and ended up grounding his own fleet. His authority and reputation were irrevocably shattered. As for Dr. Althea Williams, the airline treated her like visiting royalty. Daniel Peterson personally escorted her through the now chaotic terminal, through a private door, into the serene luxury of the Aura Air Ambassador's lounge. "Dr. Williams, I cannot apologize enough," he said again, his voice filled with genuine remorse. "We have failed on every level today, from maintenance to crew to customer service. We are in your debt for identifying a safety issue that our own procedures missed." "Just do your job, Mr. Peterson," Althea replied, not unkindly. "Make sure your crews understand that regulations and respect are not optional extras." "They will," he vowed. "The message has been received. Loud and clear." He paused. "Your conference in London is vital. We understand that. We have made alternative arrangements for you. We have a private charter jet waiting for you at the Executive Flight Center at Teterboro. A car is waiting downstairs to take you there. You will be in London with time to spare." Althea was taken aback. A private jet. It was an extravagant, almost absurd gesture, but she understood it for what it was, a desperate act of damage control and a profound signal of her restored status. She had been deemed unworthy of Seat 2A. Now they were giving her an entire plane. She simply nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson. That is Acceptable. She was escorted to a waiting black car, which whisked her away from the chaos of JFK, leaving behind the grounded planes, the ruined careers, and the smouldering wreckage of the Vance's entitlement. The karma had been delivered, not through a loud, vengeful act, but through the quiet, methodical application of rules and consequences. It was a bitter harvest, and everyone had reaped exactly what they had sown. The Gulfstream G650 was an ethereal world of cream leather and polished burr walnut. As it climbed through the clouds, leaving the lights of New York City scattered like jewels below, Dr. Althea Williams finally allowed herself to relax. The deafening roar of the 780 Evans engines was replaced by the whisper-quiet hum of the private jet. A single flight attendant, professional and discreet, had offered her a glass of champagne, the very same brand served in Aura Air's first class. But this time, she accepted. She took a small, thoughtful sip. The bubbles tingled on her tongue. This was not a victory. She felt no joy, no smug satisfaction at the downfall of the Vances, Heather, or Captain Sterling. Their fates were the unfortunate but necessary byproducts of a system being forced to correct itself. What she felt was a profound sense of exhaustion and a familiar, lingering sadness. Her job was a lonely one. She lived in a world of regulations and schematics, of metal fatigue and stress tolerances. She was a guardian at the gate, charged with preventing the unthinkable. Most days her work was anonymous, a signature on a form, an email to a compliance officer. Today, her work had become brutally, publicly personal. She hadn't wanted to reveal herself. She hadn't wanted to ground the flight. She had boarded Flight 710 as a private citizen, a tired woman named Althea who just wanted to get to her destination. But they hadn't allowed her that dignity. In their eyes, she was not a doctor, not an engineer, not a person with a valid ticket. She was a problem to be managed, an anomaly to be removed from their pristine, exclusive world. They had stripped away her identity as a passenger, leaving her with only one identity left to claim, that of a federal regulator. And she had done so. Looking out the window at the endless expanse of the darkening Atlantic, she reflected on the irony of it all. The Vances, in their desperate grasp for a few square feet of perceived superiority, had lost so much more. Captain Sterling, in his arrogant abuse of authority, had his own authority stripped away. Heather, in her blind deference to wealth and her casual dismissal of a person who didn't fit her worldview, had lost her livelihood. They had all been playing a game of status, a game Althea had no interest in, but one whose rules she ultimately controlled. Her phone buzzed. It was an email from the head of the FAA. Althea, just read the preliminary report from JFK. Unbelievable. Good work. Let me know what you need for the full audit. The NTSB is already opening an inquiry based on your report. She typed a quick reply, outlining her initial requirements for the investigation. It would be a long week. The conference in London suddenly seemed like a secondary concern. She was now at the center of a major federal investigation that would send shockwaves through Aura Air and likely the entire airline industry. The case of the grounded 787 would become a textbook example in crew training manuals for decades to come, a stark warning about bias, procedure, and the hidden power that might be sitting in any seat. The jet leveled off at its cruising altitude, a silver dart in the deep blue twilight. The flight attendant brought her a light meal on fine china. Althea ate, looking out at the curve of the earth, a solitary figure suspended between two continents. She had been denied a seat she had paid for, and in response had been given a private sky. It was a strange, disorienting form of justice. She didn't want the private jet. She didn't want the apologies or the fawning attention. All she had ever wanted was seat 2A. All she had ever wanted was to be treated with the simple, basic respect afforded to any other passenger. To be seen not as a colour or a gender, but as a person who belonged. As the plane sped eastward toward the dawn, she knew this fight was far from over. It wasn't about one flight, one couple, or one crew. It was about the subtle, pervasive biases that still existed in the most modern and sophisticated of worlds. And as she closed her eyes, seeking the rest that had been so rudely denied to her, Dr. Althea Williams knew, with a certainty as solid as the airframe carrying her through the sky, that she would be ready for the next battle, because that too was her job. So, what's the real takeaway from Dr. Althea Williams's story? It's a powerful reminder that the quietest person in the room can often be the most powerful. It's a story about karma, delivered not with a shout, but with the calm, irrefutable weight of competence and authority. It shows how prejudice and entitlement can build a house of cards that collapses the moment it's met with true strength. We've all felt dismissed or underestimated at some point in our lives. We've all wished we had that one perfect, world-stopping comeback. Dr. Williams didn't just have a comeback. She was the comeback. If this story of quiet power and explosive karma resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story of justice served in the most unexpected ways.